I ignored their calls and texts. My sister sends me a message. Dad cries every night. What does this mean? And then, I remember it too clearly because it wasn't supposed to be a significant day, just another dragged out Tuesday after school, the kind where your backpack feels heavier than usual and your shoes are scraping thin soles across sidewalk cracks. I had just left Franklin West High, texting nonstop with half-battery stress, mostly trying to defend the knockoff sneakers I'd worn that day, shiny, cheap, but clean enough to pass from a distance. My friend Danny had been roasting me in a group chat, calling them Walmart specials, and honestly, I was more pissed than embarrassed. I didn't have energy for another round of jokes or side eyes. It was late August 2007, hot enough to feel like summer refused to die, and the sun was doing that thing where it just sat there, low and unforgiving. I kept thinking about what leftovers we had at home because I hadn't eaten lunch, just a granola bar someone handed me during English. As I turned onto Maple Ridge Lane, the first thing that felt wrong wasn't the silence, it was the driveway. My dad's car was always crooked, always in some passive-aggressive war with the neighbor's trash bins. But now the driveway was too clean, with new tire tracks not his. I figured maybe he finally caved and took it in for an alignment or something, but when I walked up to the front porch, the mailbox was completely empty. My mom never emptied it. She used to let letters pile up like fallen leaves, half of them coupons and bills she never looked at. That was the second red flag. Then came the third. My key didn't fit. Like, not even close. I tried again, twisted it both ways, jiggled like hell, but the lock had been changed. I just stood there with my stupid backpack, heart starting to pound with this rising wave of something I couldn't name yet. The curtains were all pulled tight, which was wrong because my mom always left them cracked so the dog could bark at joggers. And that dog? I realized in that moment I hadn't heard a single bark. It was dead silent. I walked around the side gate, open, and slipped through to the garage entrance. That door, weirdly, was unlocked. I stepped in and froze because the garage was empty. Not just clean, but hollow. No smell of detergent. No laundry baskets. No broken treadmill leaning against the wall. Even the dented filing cabinet my dad swore he'd sell next month was gone. The sound inside was surreal, like the kind of emptiness you hear in dreams. The cement floor echoed under my steps. I checked the door to the laundry room locked. It wasn't just closed, it was brand new. I ran my hand across the paint and realized there were no scratches, no grooves, nothing from where our dog used to paw at it when storms rolled through. That's when I tried calling my mom. She didn't pick up. Straight to voicemail. I tried my dad, same result. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't even tell if it was from panic or rage. I checked the Wi-Fi, nothing. No signal. Not even a ghost of our old network. It was just blank space, like the house didn't exist anymore. I stood there, watching my phone drop from 14% to 12% in what felt like seconds. I called my little sister Megan, even though I knew she probably couldn't do anything. She was only 13. No answer, no voicemail. I walked back outside and saw our neighbor, old Mr. Kinney, watering his dead plants like it was his sacred duty. I asked if he'd seen my parents. He shrugged and said, "Saw a moving truck this morning. Figured you were already gone." Gone? That word hit harder than it should have. I told him I didn't know, and he just nodded like I was asking about the weather, like none of this was strange. I started walking toward my aunt's place, which was about a 20-minute walk if you cut through the field behind the old community center. It was getting darker, and my phone was hanging on to its last 8%. When she opened the door, she looked at me like I was a surprise she hadn't ordered. No hug. No, come in. Just one line. "They moved this morning. Didn't they tell you?" I stared at her, thinking she was messing with me, waiting for the laugh or the part where she'd say they were just inside. But nothing came. I told her no, they didn't tell me anything. And she just stood there, half inside the house like she was afraid of letting my confusion blow in through the door. She said I should call my mom and that it wasn't really her place to get involved. I was too stunned to argue, so I sat down on her porch like someone waiting for a bus that had already passed 3 stops ago. After a few minutes, she brought me a bottle of water but still didn't invite me inside. My cousin Luke came out, saw me, and just said, "Yo," before disappearing again. I tried calling my mom one more time, and this time she picked up. Her voice was flat, distant, like she was calling from across a canyon. She said, "It was easier this way," and then hung up. I stared at my screen for a minute, tried calling again, but the line was dead. Blocked. My number was blocked. I tried my dad. Blocked too. It was almost fully dark now, and my aunt came back out to tell me I couldn't stay the night. She mumbled something about boundaries and how they had their reasons, but I didn't hear most of it because I was already standing, already walking away with nowhere to go. I thought about heading back to the house, breaking in just to sleep, but what was even left in there? Nothing. No food. No bed. Just walls that used to be home. I walked to Vince's place, which was on the other side of Sycamore Road. His mom answered, confused at first, then concerned when she saw my face. I didn't even lie, just told her I had nowhere to go for the night. She looked behind her like she was asking someone invisible if this was okay, then stepped aside and let me in. Vince wasn't even home. His dad gave me this look like I was a leaky pipe under the sink. But they let me crash in the garage, full of boxes, yard tools, and the smell of years-old sneakers. I slept on an old camping mat with a rolled-up hoodie for a pillow. The cold made my knees ache, and every time I blinked, I kept thinking the lock not working must have been a dream. That any minute now, I'd wake up to my mom yelling at me for being late, or my dad drinking burnt coffee on the porch. But morning came, and the only sound was Vince's dad starting his truck. I was still there, and they were still gone. I woke up in Vince's garage with a stiff neck, covered in a layer of sweat and dust, surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with broken Christmas decorations and things nobody had touched in years. The air smelled like stale fertilizer and old rubber. I laid there for a minute just staring at the ceiling, trying to remember if any of this was normal, if this was what surviving looked like. I hadn't heard from my family, not a word, and after that one phone call from my mom, those 5 words, "It was easier this way," I stopped expecting anything at all. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. For the first few days, Vince didn't ask a lot of questions. I told him I was staying for a bit, and he just shrugged, said something like, "Cool, just don't touch my GameCube." His parents, on the other hand, weren't exactly thrilled. His mom started leaving smaller portions on the table when she cooked. His dad made comments loud enough for me to hear. Stuff like, "Electricity isn't free," or, "How long's this kid planning to visit?" I started leaving the garage before the sun came up and staying out until it was dark again, just so they wouldn't notice me as much. I kept going to school, even though I had to wear the same 3 shirts in rotation and my backpack was starting to fall apart at the seams. I avoided people as much as I could. The teachers mostly ignored me after I stopped raising my hand. A guidance counselor pulled me aside one morning and asked if everything was okay at home. I told him we were just in the middle of a move and that everything was fine. He stared at me for a while like he knew I was lying, but he didn't press it. I guess nobody really wants to deal with the mess if they don't have to. I checked social media on the school computers during lunch, and that's how I found out where my family had gone. My sister, Megan, had posted a picture of a brand new bedroom, captioned "Fresh Start," with a sparkle emoji and a tiny dog in the corner that I'd never seen before. The walls were painted sky blue. There was a whole new bed set, posters, even a beanbag. There was no trace of me in that photo, no memory of the old house or the life they'd left behind. It was like I'd been edited out. That night, I didn't go back to Vince's place. I walked around until my legs ached, ending up behind the recreation center, where I'd stashed a few things in an old gym locker that didn't lock right. It was freezing, but I curled up in the corner next to a pile of mats and tried to sleep. For the next few weeks, I floated between that locker room, an abandoned pool shed, and the floor of a kid named Trevor's basement. Trevor didn't care. He just wanted someone to help clean up after the parties his parents never knew about. At one of those parties, I overheard a guy joking about me being the dude who doesn't have a house. I laughed like it was funny, then left through the back door before anyone noticed. I started carrying a garbage bag with my clothes, and I'd wash them in the gas station bathroom across from the railroad tracks. I dried them in the sun or just wore them damp. I kept a prepaid phone alive with the few bucks I made mowing lawns and doing grocery runs for older neighbors. People gave you cash if you acted like you weren't desperate. I only saw my mom once during that entire stretch. It was at this grocery store in South Fairview, miles from Vince's neighborhood. She was walking down the frozen aisle with Megan and a guy I'd never seen before. She was laughing. Megan was holding a shopping list. They looked like any normal family. I stood there, frozen, gripping a pack of instant ramen like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. My mom saw me. Our eyes locked. And she just kept walking. Didn't flinch. Didn't say my name. Just moved past like I wasn't there. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anything. Not at first. But later, in the park, sitting on a cold metal swing and chewing stale noodles, I felt something in me harden. Not break, just change. Like a wall was going up inside me, sealing everything behind it. I stopped reaching out. I deleted their numbers. I blocked Megan's account. I figured if they could replace me that easily, then maybe I could erase them, too. After a while, Vince's dad told me it was time to leave. He didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. "You've been here long enough, and your family needs to step up," he said, like I had a choice. I grabbed my bag, told Vince thanks with a weak fist bump, and left before anyone could change their mind. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't say goodbye. That night, I ended up sleeping behind a hardware store near the highway, using an old sleeping bag that smelled like gasoline and mildew. Some days, I'd get lucky and crash on someone's couch, kids from school who didn't ask too many questions or cared more about not getting caught than helping. I learned to keep quiet, make myself small, be invisible. I didn't eat unless someone offered. I didn't charge my phone unless someone left a cord plugged in. I kept my stuff in a stolen gym bag I found at a thrift store's donation bin. Everything I owned fit inside it. One night, I overheard Trevor's mom whispering that I was a bad influence. She said she didn't want that kind of trouble under her roof. I left while they were asleep, walked until sunrise, then found a quiet corner in the rec center and passed out next to the vending machine. No one woke me. No one cared. That's when I started writing everything down. Not in a journal or some sad poetry notebook, but in my phone's notes app. Every time they lied to me, every time they used my name to get something they didn't deserve, every time my dad asked for my social and said it was just for paperwork. I didn't even know what it meant when I was younger. I just gave it to him because I thought that's what kids were supposed to do. One of those notes was about a phone plan. I remembered signing something in pen when I was 13. Said it was for family coverage, but the bills kept showing up in my name after they left. Another time, they signed me up for a discount utility program because they said I was a minor and it made things cheaper. I had no clue what I was agreeing to. Now that I knew better, I started researching. I found websites and forums about credit theft and identity abuse, stuff I had no idea existed. Most of the answers were the same. It's hard to prove, and nobody cares unless you have money or a lawyer. But I didn't want justice. I wanted leverage. I wanted them to remember me every time something in their new life fell apart. I started thinking differently. If I was already a problem, maybe I should actually be one. Not for the people giving me shelter, but for the ones who left me like I was an old couch they didn't feel like moving. I wanted to make them feel what I felt, but worse, helpless, stranded, unwanted. Not through violence or some dramatic stunt. Just paperwork. Just patience. I was 17, almost 18, with a trashed credit report, no bank account, and no clue where I'd be sleeping the next night. But I was done waiting for someone to fix it. I started calling the companies linked to the bills. Some hung up. Some laughed. One told me I'd need a guardian to dispute the account. I didn't argue. I just kept track, kept filing notes, kept collecting evidence. My plan wasn't fully formed yet, but the pieces were starting to line up. I didn't know when it would all come together. I just knew that when it did, they'd wish they'd never pretended I didn't exist. I didn't want an apology. I wanted them to feel it. In their wallets, their homes, their records. Every time they opened a bill, I wanted my name to be there like a curse, like a reminder of the sun they tried to erase. Getting older didn't mean anything magical happened. It just meant fewer people asked questions when you disappeared. I turned 18 in a damp room above a laundromat in a part of town where streetlights barely worked and every car alarm felt like a lullaby. I shared the place with two guys I barely knew, Jonas and Eric, who didn't care what I'd been through. Only that I paid rent in cash and didn't bring cops around. The walls were thin and everything smelled like burnt fabric softener. But for the first time since being dumped like trash, I had a key that worked and a lock nobody else could change. I picked up every odd job I could, sweeping backrooms, loading trucks, handing out flyers at events where nobody wanted to be handed anything. I stacked groceries at a 24-hour market, cleaned after parties at dive bars, and scraped gum off the floors of the movie theater just to make enough for the bare minimum. I skipped meals, skipped sleep, and learned to stretch $20 like it was a miracle. I kept a burner phone alive with top-up cards and wrote everything down in a battered notebook hidden under a loose floor tile. That notebook was more valuable to me than food. It was proof. Mail started catching up with me again, even though I never told anyone where I was staying. Somehow, old addresses got forwarded, and soon envelopes started arriving with my name but their debts. First it was junk, credit card offers with insane interest rates. Then came late payment notices from companies I'd never heard of. A cable bill for a premium package I never ordered. A car insurance cancellation for a vehicle I'd never driven. I knew exactly what this was. They were still using my name. Even now, even after everything. I checked my credit again, using a free trial that I canceled minutes later. There it was, 3 open accounts from a house I'd never stepped foot in, all tied to my social. One of them had missed payments going back 6 months. Another was flagged for suspicious activity. The third one had been used to finance a sofa and a brand new washer-dryer combo. That stung more than I thought it would. I remembered them telling me we couldn't afford new shoes, but apparently my name could buy appliances. I called the companies listed and explained I wasn't the account holder. I told them I'd been a minor when the accounts were opened and hadn't lived at that address. Some agents were polite, but useless. Others treated me like I was scamming them. One guy told me to have my parents call him to clear things up. I laughed so hard I nearly threw my phone. I started collecting documentation, bus passes, old school schedules, job stubs with different addresses, everything I could use to prove I'd been somewhere else during the years those accounts were opened. Eventually, I got one company to reverse the charges after I sent in a mountain of paperwork. They said the debt would now fall back on the original cosigner. That was the moment something shifted in me. I didn't just want to clear my name anymore. I wanted every cent they tried to pin on me to come roaring back like a debt collector with a grudge. I wanted them to feel what it was like to answer for something they thought they'd gotten away with. The next company wasn't so cooperative. They wanted notarized forms and multiple ID copies, half of which I didn't even have. I showed up in person at one of their offices, sat in the lobby for 3 hours, and when I finally got called up, the lady behind the desk barely looked at me. She said, "We've never seen a case like this," as if that meant anything. I told her I wanted the charges off my record. She said they needed proof I wasn't complicit. I said I was 17 and homeless. She said that wasn't her department. I walked out and stood in the parking lot watching cars pass for an hour, just thinking. That's when I realized I was wasting time begging. I didn't need their sympathy. I needed strategy. I went back and filed a dispute with every agency I could find. I documented every call, recorded what I could, and mailed certified letters just so I'd have signatures. When things still didn't move, I reported them for fraud and told them I had legal records proving I'd been separated from that household. One by one, I chipped away at the pile. Every dropped charge was like pulling a splinter from my name. Every closed account was a door slammed in their face. I found out through a cousin, one of the few who hadn't blocked me, that their bills were stacking up. The new house was in a nicer part of the state, just outside Dayton, with white fencing and a second-story balcony. But nice neighborhoods didn't erase bad credit. Their refinance had been denied twice, and my name was a red flag in every report. I knew this because they started trying to reach out again. First, it was a weird voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, someone claiming to be concerned about a financial matter. Then came an email to an old account I barely used anymore, full of pleading words and fake concern. "Tyler, this isn't about the past. We just need your help one time to clean everything up." I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the email, highlighted the manipulative phrases, and added it to the notebook. Then Megan messaged me on a random social media app, like we hadn't spent years in silence. Her message was short, just, "Why are you doing this?" As if the last decade hadn't happened. As if I owed them peace after what they did. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked up the county records for their property and saw how many liens were stacking up. Utilities, medical debt, a defaulted loan under a shared account. My name kept showing up on applications I never signed. But now, because of the fraud reports I'd filed, everything was bouncing back. They had built a life using pieces of me, and now those pieces were breaking apart and cutting them. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was methodical. Every time I found another false entry, I flagged it. I mailed another certified dispute. I followed up like a debt collector. I became the system they thought they'd never have to face. I started seeing results. Their cell phone lines were disconnected for non-payment. Their electricity had been temporarily shut off twice. I heard they were having trouble selling the house because their co-applicant's credit was under investigation. That co-applicant was me. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling in my tiny room and smile, not because I was thriving, but because they were finally feeling the weight they dropped on me. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for accountability. And when that didn't come, I billed it myself. I wasn't finished, not by a long shot, but every bounce bill, every denial letter they got in the mail, every call from a collections agency they had to answer, that was me. That was my name they stole, coming back like a ghost they couldn't bury. I started drafting the next step, something bigger. Not just fighting accounts one by one, but burning the entire bridge from both ends. They wanted to live like I never existed, but now they couldn't take a breath without stepping on a landmine with my name etched into it. I was ready to go further. If they wanted to forget me, I'd make sure they remembered me for the rest of their lives. I was 26 when the envelope showed up, fat and official looking, with my full name typed in bold across the front like it meant something. It came through a forwarding address I used for random things, mostly government stuff, and the occasional bank form, and seeing my name printed so precisely made my stomach clench in a way I didn't expect. I hadn't used that full legal name in years, not since I detached myself from every record they had stained. But there it was again, and the return address said it came from a law office in Springfield I'd never heard of. For a second, I thought maybe someone died. That was the first stupid thought, some distant relative leaving me a broken watch or a savings bond that never matured. But the moment I opened it, I knew exactly what it was. My parents had resurfaced, not with apologies or explanations, but with paperwork. According to the attached documents, they were trying to refinance their house, the house they bought with my information buried deep in the application, and they couldn't move forward unless I signed off on something called a liability release tied to an old utility debt. Apparently, back when I started filing those fraud complaints and kicking debts back to them, I'd tangled the paperwork in a way that made me a ghost in their system, an uncooperative shadow who refused to vanish. And now they needed that shadow to sign. They needed me to untie the knot they'd wrapped around their own throats. It was so perfect I almost laughed. The letter was stuffed with highlighted legalese, a prepaid return envelope, and a note written in shaky handwriting that I recognized immediately as my mother's. She had scribbled at the bottom of the page, "Please, Tyler, just help us this once. We can talk after. We miss you." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because it meant anything, but because it confirmed exactly what I'd known for years. They didn't miss me. They missed the access. They missed the convenience of my name, my birth date, my signature. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. The text read, "It's your dad. I know I don't deserve a response, but I'm sorry. Please call." That was the first time I'd seen the word sorry attached to anything they'd done. I didn't call. I didn't even think about it. Instead, I saved the message, flagged it, and added it to the archive. Later that night, I got a Facebook message from Megan, who I hadn't spoken to since she blocked me in high school. It said, "Why are you doing this? Dad is crying every day. He says he made a mistake." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. There was no anger left in me, no satisfaction even, just a strange kind of detachment, like watching a movie I'd seen before and already knew the ending to. For over a decade, they lived with the belief that they'd erased me, that I was just a phase they could outgrow. But they forgot that ghosts don't disappear. They just wait. Instead of responding to anything, I filed a formal petition with the county clerk. It was a legal request to dissolve all shared financial responsibility tied to my parents, retroactive to the year they'd abandoned me. It wasn't easy, nothing involving bureaucracy ever is, but I'd done enough digging over the years to know how to file the right forms, send the right letters, and push through the right cracks in the system. I sent copies to their attorney, the bank, and even the refinancing agency handling the house. I included a signed affidavit, copies of my old dispute claims, and a clear message. I am not, nor have I ever been, a consenting co-signer to any financial obligation shared with these individuals after June 2007. Any further attempt to involve me will be considered fraudulent. I had it notarized and scanned for record keeping. I wasn't bluffing. If they tried to drag me back in, I'd burn the bridge they built with my name and salt the ground underneath. 3 days after the filings went through, my aunt called. I hadn't heard her voice in almost 9 years, and the moment I answered, she launched into a guilt-soaked monologue about family and second chances. She said I was being cold. She said I was hurting people who loved me. She said Megan was confused and my dad was deteriorating from stress. I asked her if she remembered the night I showed up at her porch, and she wouldn't let me inside. She went quiet. Then she said, "That was a long time ago." I hung up. Next came the flurry of texts from cousins I hadn't seen since middle school. Some told me I was being selfish. Others said I should just move on because they're not perfect, but they're still your parents. A few tried to sound wise, tossing in phrases like, "Forgiveness is healing," and "You don't want to carry this forever." But none of them had been there when I slept under bleachers. None of them knew what it was like to be left off the lease, the will, the group photo. They just wanted the noise to stop. When I didn't respond to any of them, someone sent my address to my uncle, who showed up at my door wearing a tight expression and acting like he was entitled to yell. He told me I was overreacting. He said I was dragging this out for attention. I told him if he didn't leave in 10 seconds, I'd file a harassment report. He stepped back, but called me ungrateful before walking off like he was the injured one. The best part was that the refinance still didn't go through. One of my old friends, who worked in real estate, told me that once a co-signer is flagged in fraud reports, the banks won't touch the application without a full investigation. That meant weeks, maybe months, of frozen assets, unpaid bills, and nosy questions from loan officers. Every time they tried to scrub me out, my name came back red and loud. More messages came. Another one from Megan, this time a voice memo, her whispering that mom wasn't eating and dad cried every night. She said, "Please, Tyler, what do you want from us?" But that was the thing. I didn't want anything. I didn't want revenge or repayment. I wanted silence. I wanted distance. I wanted the kind of peace you only get when you're finally left alone. So I never answered. I watched them scramble, then settle, then spiral. And when the bank finally sent me confirmation that I was no longer legally attached to any part of their house, their debts, or their lives, I sat on my back steps and exhaled so deeply it felt like something left my body for good. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just felt still. They had built their lives with my name carved into the foundation, but I'd ripped it out, brick by brick, until there was nothing left holding them up. Whatever happened to them after this, it wasn't my responsibility. Whatever crumbled, it wasn't mine to rebuild. Let them explain to loan officers why their son disappeared from every document. Let them cry into voicemail boxes I'll never check. Let them figure out how to start over again, this time without me. You'd think that would be the end of it. The legal filings, the shutdown, the silence. You'd expect they'd get the message once I removed myself from every system they tried to trap me inside. And for a few months, I actually believed it was done. No more letters. No more texts. Just quiet. But people like that don't learn through consequence. They only panic when it affects their comfort, and once the noise faded, they came back with something even more pathetic. It started with an email sent from a burner address that didn't even have her name on it, but I recognized the writing instantly. "Hey, I know it's been a while. I've been thinking a lot. Can we talk?" That was the subject line. The body was worse. It rambled about growth, about reflection, about missing how things used to be. Like we ever had something worth missing. No acknowledgement of the things they did. No reference to leaving me alone at 16 with nothing but a phone and a deadlock. Just vibes and gaslighting. I deleted it without replying, but something in me knew it wouldn't be the last time. A few weeks later, Megan messaged me again. This time she was angry. She accused me of tearing apart what little was left of the family. She said I had made dad sick with stress. She said mom barely left the house anymore. And then she ended it with, "Do you even care what happens to us?" That line stuck with me, not because I felt guilt, but because it confirmed everything I'd always known. Even after all this time, they still thought I owed them something. What was I supposed to care about? That the people who erased me were uncomfortable now that their choices came with a price? That the house they built on fraud and selfishness was crumbling under its own weight? They hadn't checked on me once when I was couch surfing, when I was sleeping behind buildings in the winter, when I was choosing between food and phone service. They were only crying now because their reflection looked ugly and it was finally showing in public. And just when I thought it couldn't get more ridiculous, one of their old friends reached out through a mutual contact. Apparently, Haley, yeah, her name finally slipped out, was trying to start some online healing blog, like she was the one who'd been abandoned. I looked it up. There it was. Photos of her in staged lighting, holding mugs with inspirational quotes, captions about forgiveness being the first step to freedom. There were even donation links. People were giving her money. I almost choked laughing. I watched as she posted stories about loss and recovery, painting herself as a mother who lost touch with her son due to unfortunate circumstances and pain that couldn't be named. I saw comments full of support from strangers who didn't know the truth, who had never seen a locked door or felt the sting of being blocked in real life. She turned her guilt into a brand, and for a minute, it almost worked. But the internet has teeth, and eventually, someone called her out. A girl I hadn't spoken to in years dropped a reply under one of Haley's posts that said, "Didn't y'all abandon your kid in '07 and pretend he didn't exist?" It was like a spark in a dry field. Comments exploded. Some defended her, others demanded answers. The blog went private a few days later. And still, nobody reached out to me with honesty. Nobody said, "We're sorry, not for the consequences, but for the choice." I didn't need them to fall apart. I just needed them to stop pretending they hadn't broken something that could never be put back. I wasn't 17 anymore, begging to sleep on a friend's couch. I wasn't 19, filing complaints I barely understood. I was 26, standing on my own foundation, one they could never touch again. A few months later, I moved cities, took a new job, got a place with better lighting and locks that I owned. I stopped looking over my shoulder every time I checked my mail. And slowly, the need for revenge faded into something quieter. Not forgiveness, just distance. The kind that doesn't shrink with time but stretches forever. Every now and then, I hear from someone who still talks to them. They'll mention my name like it's a sore tooth, something people press on to see if it still hurts. They say things like, "They really do miss you," or "It's not too late to fix it." But they're wrong. It's been too late since the moment they shut that door and left without a word. So no, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm not looking for some reunion or dramatic apology. I got what I came for, my name back, my life back, and the knowledge that every time they try to rebuild, they'll remember who they buried. And that memory will live with them longer than I ever did.